Good morning, and welcome to our Telepress event in advance of Amazon responsibility, and I'll be moderating today's call. There are a total of 12 shareholder-sponsored resolutions up for a vote at Wednesday's meeting, and today you will be hearing from 8 of the proponents of those resolutions. Their remarks are for the record, and their names and organizations will be provided via slides. If there is any question about attribution, or if you wish to follow up with one of the proponents, please contact me. You will be in listen-only mode until each of the proponents has given their remarks. However, if a question comes up, please use the question box on the right at any point. When you do, we just ask that you first tell us your name, organization, and to whom we should direct your question. We will answer questions in the order they are received. We are recording the call, and a link to the recording, as well as today's slide deck with details about the resolutions, will be emailed to you. We will begin with Jared Fernandez, shareholder advocate with Green Century Capital Management, who, along with Nadira Narayan of ICCR, has been helping coordinate shareholders' work on Amazon. Jared will help explain why Amazon is facing so many proposals from its shareholders. Go ahead, Jared.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Amazon's growth over the past 5 years has been astounding. Share prices have grown over 500% since May of 2014, and Amazon is now neck and neck with Apple as the world's most valuable public company in the world. Despite these tremendous gains for shareholders, the lack of attention and public disclosure to a number of broad ESG risks pose legitimate questions about the continued success and resiliency of the company. 1 year ago, at a gathering of members of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, ICCR, a common refrain began to emerge. Every investor who had previously attempted to engage Amazon on ESG risk exposure was getting nowhere. The experiences of each investor were eerily similar. Stories of difficulty receiving responses from the company. When conversations were granted, they rarely progressed past a singular meeting, and the agendas for calls were dictated by the company, and Amazon representatives consistently refused to share any insights regarding its approach to risk management beyond what was already publicly stated on its website. In our view, Amazon had been avoiding constructive and substantive dialogue with its shareholders. In November, the Interfaith Center of Corporate Responsibility organized an investor sign-on letter to convey these frustrations to Amazon executives. The letter, signed by 114 global institutional investors representing $2.6 trillion in assets under management, highlighted the company's reluctance to authentically engage with shareholders and implored the company to participate in more meaningful engagement moving forward. In an attempt to highlight the significant gaps we perceived in Amazon's attention to operational risk exposure, ICCR members filed 10 shareholder proposals addressing some of our time's most pressing issues. This year's broad showing by investors demonstrates the clear material gaps in Amazon's various policies and disclosure, posing significant risk to long-term shareholder value. Following this Wednesday's annual meeting, ICCR members will continue to push Amazon to meaningfully address these operational risks. The goal for 2019 is to organize collective, ongoing dialogues with the company to stress the need for greater disclosure and engagement with shareholders. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, Jared. And now we'll go to Shankar Narayan of ACLU, Washington. Shankar, go
thank
ahead.
you. Thank you. As noted, I'm with the ACLU, which includes our national organization and our affiliates in California, Massachusetts, and Washington State, and also on behalf of a broader coalition of organizations concerned with the impacts of face surveillance. And on Wednesday, I will present Resolution 6, which calls on Amazon's board of directors to stop sales of recognition to government entities at Amazon's shareholder meeting. The ACLU first sounded the alarm about recognition in late 2017. We and others warned that the technology was already being used by law enforcement to enable mass surveillance with no safeguards for civil liberties, and was being marketed to identify persons of interest and to incorporate into body cameras. Since that time, a unified chorus of impacted communities, civil rights organizations, tech industry experts, customers, academics, members of Congress, and even Amazon's own employees have warned about the dangers of government use of face surveillance. The ACLU and others tested recognition and showed it to be biased. It is less accurate for people of color and others. But even if perfectly accurate and unbiased, face surveillance fundamentally alters the balance of power between government and individuals, arming governments with unprecedented power to track, control, and harm people. We may leave our cell phones at home, but none of us can change our face print. Recognition would enable police to identify protesters, ICE to track down immigrants, and cities to routinely monitor the activities of their own residents, even providing dangerous and likely inaccurate information to police about a person's state of mind. And a long history of other surveillance technologies shows that face surveillance is certain to be disproportionately aimed at immigrants, religious minorities, people of color, activists, and other vulnerable communities. This is exactly why San Francisco has passed a ban, thanks to the good work of Matt Cagle of the ACLU of Northern California and many others. And other jurisdictions, including Washington State and Massachusetts, are considering moratoria on law enforcement use. In a meeting with Amazon leadership last December, many other community leaders from a diverse set of impacted communities expressed our concerns around recognition. Those leaders expressed that Amazon should not sell this technology to government, that it is so powerful that safeguards would be inadequate to protect communities. Despite this meeting and a groundswell of concern, Amazon has continued to market recognition without acknowledging its harms or accepting responsibility to mitigate them. Whatever the outcome of this vote, this issue will not go away. This technology is an unprecedented threat to all of our civil liberties and privacy. It does not belong in government hands. Amazon's continued indiscriminate sales of this technology will hurt its own brand and valuation, opening it up to actions from shareholders and from those harmed by the use of recognition. We believe it is time for Amazon to heed the groundswell of opposition to government sales of recognition for the sake of our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shankar. And now to discuss that proposal on the risks of sales of facial recognition software is Mary Beth Gallagher, Executive Director of the TriState Coalition for Responsible Investment. Mary Beth?
Great, thanks, Susanna. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Beth, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Brentwood and the other proponents of shareholder proposal number 6. This resolution asks Amazon to prohibit sales of its facial recognition technology, known as Recognition, to governments unless it can find that it does not interfere with civil rights and human rights. We encourage all investors to support this resolution on Wednesday, and also urge Amazon to take the steps necessary to stop selling recognition to the government until the proper guardrails, regulations, or controls are in place to ensure that this technology does not harm the civil rights and human rights of the communities at risk. As Shankar just introduced, there are potential risks to society, but as investors, we're also concerned about the risks to the company that arise from the sales of recognition to government. This is what led us to first be concerned and to file this shareholder resolution. First, on the risks to society, in the hands of the government, this technology risks reinforcing racial biases and inequities in our criminal justice and law enforcement system in the United States, and it may be disproportionately used to endanger and surveil people of color and minorities here and across the globe. These risks are also present for immigrant communities in the United States. As we know, Amazon has reportedly pitched this technology to immigration and customs enforcement. Two recent reports from the Georgetown Center on Privacy and Technology make it clear that this is not an imaginary future. It is already happening. Police are acquiring real-time surveillance tech in cities across the country, and Amazon has sold it to at least 2 state law enforcement agencies and the FBI. This will create surveillance in real time without consent, which may interfere with freedom of expression, assembly, privacy, and it also will reinforce biases. And as Shankar has spoken about, there is research demonstrating that recognition may be less accurate for people of color and women. But I want to be clear, Recognition can be used in dangerous and biased ways by the government, whether it is accurate or inaccurate. Our goal is not for Amazon to create a more accurate surveillance tool that can be used to more effectively surveil people of color, immigrants, and activists. Instead, we're calling on them to halt the sales until the company can reassure all of its stakeholders that it does not present human rights risks and civil rights risks.
Great. Thank you, Mary Beth.
Susan,
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to speak about the risks to the company, which are also significant. Investors lack evidence demonstrating that Amazon conducted human rights due diligence and assessed the risks before beginning sales to the government. And we are not assured that the policies that they have in place are effective. This includes their acceptable use policy, which reportedly has certain parameters in place on confidence thresholds on matching an image, but it is not closely monitored by Amazon, may not always be followed by its customers, and is therefore not an effective tool for protecting vulnerable communities. The failure to adequately manage the risks of sales of recognition to government may present legal, human capital management, and reputational risks to Amazon. And while recognition of this technology is likely, we believe strongly that the company should make the decision to halt sales. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Mary Beth. And now to discuss a second resolution calling for an independent study of recognition is John Harrington, President of Harrington Investments. John, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning. On June 15, 2018, Harrington Investments and 18 other institutional investors wrote a letter to Mr. Jeffrey Bezos, founder and CEO of Amazon, raising serious concerns about the development and marketing of facial recognition technology being sold to law enforcement agencies. Mr. Bezos nor anyone associated with our company responded to us or even acknowledged receipt of our communication until we filed a shareholder resolution with our corporation. This only goes to show how little attention management pays to its shareholders as important stakeholders. We feel strongly that such infrastructure technology poses a dangerous threat to personal privacy and human rights. Deployment will undermine company values, create financial risk, and lead to an explosion of litigation, legislation, and regulation at all levels of government. As important shareholders as owners of Amazon, we feel that our board of directors, as ultimate legally responsible fiduciaries, have not overseen an exhaustive and comprehensive study and analysis of this potentially dangerous surveillance technology to even determine if it should be released upon the public or if it may endanger privacy or civil rights, unfairly target or surveil people of color, immigrants, and activists in the United States, or to the extent which it may be marketed to authoritarian governments. We feel our board must exercise its fiduciary duty of care, which clearly includes thoroughly evaluating the impacts on Amazon, reputational risk, and shareholder value of any surveillance technology our company markets where serious danger to civil liberties exist. This technology, unleashed and available to government agencies, including authoritarian foreign governments, consolidated with existing personal information, including data, photographic and video identification, could maximize overall corporate control of our financial and retail future, but easily result in a storm of related litigation and regulation, leading to untold cost and risk to shareholders, customers, and other stakeholders. Facial recognition coupled with already existing personal information will encompass massive data on every human being. Every person will be tracked 24/7. Government and corporate retail surveillance will be ubiquitous, individual privacy non-existent. Cameras are everywhere, and once facial recognition coupled with personal data is institutionalized, it will be available to the highest bidder. Constant surveillance is the mother's milk of government authoritarianism. I'm pleased that both Proxy Advisory Services, Institutional Shareholder Services, ISS, and Glass Lewis support our shareholder resolution calling for our board of directors as fiduciaries to commission an independent study of recognition and report to shareholders no later than September 1st, 2019. I urgently request all Amazon shareholders and the public to support our resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And now to discuss a resolution requesting reporting on food waste is Rabbi Joshua Ratner, Director of Advocacy for Jalens Network.
Good morning, everybody. This is Josh Ratner from the Jalens Investor Network on behalf of Jalens and our partners at Mercy Investment Services, Clean Yield Asset Management, and First Affirmative. We're pleased to share with you information about proposal resolution number 4 on food waste. In brief, the resolution calls on Amazon to issue an annual report on the environmental and social impacts of food waste generated from the company's operations, given the significant impact that food waste has on societal risk from climate change and hunger. We believe firmly that an enhanced disclosure by Amazon of both its food waste footprint and its efforts to minimize the social and environmental consequences of food waste would enable shareholders to evaluate how the company is managing related financial, operational, regulatory, and societal risks. Such disclosures could also help Amazon identify cost savings opportunities, enhance its reputation, and at a minimum, compete effectively with its peers in demonstrating action on this critical social and environmental issue. We know from various studies that food waste, 40% of all food produced in the US is wasted, and that causes devastating social and environmental consequences. Decomposing food in landfills generates 23% of all methane emissions in the United States, exacerbating climate change. Project Drawdown cites food waste reduction as the third most impactful tactic in reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. And from a social perspective, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, ending food waste would preserve enough food to feed 2 billion people, more than twice the number of undernourished people in the world today. Beyond the social and environmental imperatives for addressing food waste, we believe this resolution is critical because it will drive important innovations at Amazon. Addressing food waste would create cost savings opportunities of untold amounts. We don't know how much Amazon actually is wasting because they haven't been willing to disclose that information. But we do know that in the US, food retailers account for $57 billion of losses from food waste. And as Amazon increases its market share in the food retail space, both from a retail and online perspective, we know that it's a significant component of that 57 billion. We've also seen how strategic partnerships between food retailers and food manufacturers to identify food waste in their supply chain and optimize ways to avoid that can lead to significant cost savings for companies. We've also seen most companies, most food retailers, both brick and mortar and online, taking significant steps to address their own food waste, whether it be Kroger, Walmart, Ahold USA, quite a few companies out there. Most of Amazon's competitors have taken steps to at least report on their food waste, if not take steps to reduce it considerably. This creates risk to Amazon, to its reputation by lagging behind its competitors. And we as shareholders want to see Amazon step up and join its competitors in seeing food waste as an opportunity for innovation and making dramatic improvements to the social and environmental impacts of food waste causes. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I just want to remind any press who joined late to, if you have a question, you can go ahead and submit it in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we can have them accumulate as we go along the webinar. We'll be taking them at the end. And now to present a resolution asking for a plan for climate change and reduced dependency on fossil fuels, we have Eliza Pan from Amazon Employees for Climate Justice. Eliza, go ahead.
Hi, this is Eliza. Yes, as mentioned, I am a former employee at Amazon. As of last month, I worked at Amazon for 5.5 years, and I'm speaking on behalf of the employees who are filing this resolution. So we are requesting that Amazon's board prepare a plan, a climate plan that discusses how it's planning for disruptions caused by climate change and how Amazon is transitioning off of fossil fuels. This is driven by concerns in 3 major buckets that employees are seeing: business and operational risk, reputation and retention risk, and regulatory and investor risk. Firstly, employees are already seeing business and operation risk in everyday work. Extreme weather disrupts our operations on an increasingly regular basis. Extreme heat or cold grounds prime airplanes. Storms and wildfires disrupt both data centers and fulfillment centers. Despite these events disrupting both Amazon operations and Amazon worker labor conditions, Amazon does not disclose how it views these risks and how it plans to respond to disruptions or how it is managing these risks going forward. Secondly, Amazon is open to increasing reputational, hiring, and retention risk. 64% of millennials report reluctance to work for a company whose corporate social responsibility record does not align with their values. Over 7,500 Amazon employees have publicly declared their support for this resolution and are asking the company to adopt not only this resolution, but also more actions to demonstrate its commitment to climate as it states, as it likes to state publicly. Leadership on climate attracts ability to attract and retain talent. As employees, we know how difficult it is already to hire people and train people, and this hit to Amazon's reputation does not help with its ongoing business. Lastly, Amazon is increasingly open to regulatory and investor risk. In April 2019, a group of 34 central banks around the world warned of the strong risk that climate-related financial risks are not fully reflected in asset valuations. Amazon could risk significant financial risk in such scenarios due to the company's over-reliance on fossil fuels, as evidenced by large investments in data centers in Virginia, a state that's mostly powered by fossil fuels, and its recent purchase of 20,000 diesel vans for its delivery fleet. In addition, while Amazon prides itself on being a leader, it is significantly lagging its peers in a number of industries on climate action. Microsoft, Google, Apple, Walmart, DHL, and UPS all release annual sustainability reports and report their carbon footprint using the CDP standard. Amazon does not. Microsoft, Google, Apple have company-wide carbon neutrality goals. Amazon does not. Microsoft, Google, Walmart, DHL, and UPS all have specific goals to reduce their emissions. Amazon does not. While Amazon has promised company-wide carbon footprint disclosure later this year, it has not made any commitments to reduce that company-wide. Existing commitments, such as Shipment Zero, are open-ended, not comprehensive, and lack context and information to evaluate size of impact. For example, Amazon provides data such as reduced packaging by tens of thousands of boxes or growing number of low pollution electric vans to demonstrate its commitments to climate action, but it does not provide any data to put those numbers in context, making it virtually impossible for shareholders to evaluate Amazon's actions. Another example, Amazon's Shipment Zero announcement, which is a goal to make 50% of all Amazon shipments to customers net zero in carbon by 2030, does not actually commit to any net reduction in fossil fuel usage or greenhouse gas emissions. Given Amazon's growth rate, greening 50% of shipments by 2030 will likely mean a net increase in the climate impact of Amazon's shipping operations relative to the current baseline. In addition, Amazon's most senior sustainability officer operates 4 levels below from CEO Jeff Bezos. Comparatively, sustainability leaders at Microsoft, Apple, Walmart, and UPS are no more than 2 levels below the highest leadership level. The sustainability leader at Apple reports directly to the CEO, Tim Cook. Amazon's peers have made disclosures and commitments on greenhouse gas emissions with far more speed and thoroughness. As an employee and shareholder, it is concerning to see Amazon lag so severely behind peers on climate action and risk mitigation. Thank you.
Thanks, Eliza. Okay, and now for a proposal on independent board chair, Lisa Lindsley, Capital Markets Advisor at Some of Us. Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you, Susanna. So Jeff Bezos, who's the richest man in the world, is currently his own boss. He's been his own boss through most of the history of Amazon. And this is a bad practice in corporate governance. The job of the board of directors is to supervise management on behalf of the shareholders. And so Jeff Bezos can either be the chair or the CEO, but he should not be both of these things. So we believe that Bezos needs a boss. And this proposal, which is supported by ISS, Glass Lewis, and PERC, is designed to address many of the issues that have already been brought up on this call: human rights risk, risk of helping imprison migrants, the rights of workers in Amazon's headquarters and its security contractor and its warehouse workers, the rights of communities where Amazon operates, and the economic health of those communities. So it's a very simple corporate governance best practice proposal, and we urge shareholders to support it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And now for a proposal to end Amazon's unequal vote counting, we have Bruce Herbert, Chief Executive of Investor Voice. Bruce, go ahead. Bruce, check that you're not on mute. Bruce, we can't hear you. Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll come back to Bruce once we get his audio sorted. Let's move on. Julie, if you can switch the slide, we're going to move on to the resolution link executive pay to inclusion and other ESG issues. The proponent is Zebin Asset Management, and we have Pat Domeno, who's the Director of Socially Responsible Investment. Go ahead, Pat. Okay, we're having trouble with the audio. Pat, are you on mute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Pat.
Okay, thanks so much, Susanna. Thanks to Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility for pulling together media members today to talk about Amazon and what we view is a real necessity for Amazon to turn a corner in the way that they think about, deal with their major stakeholders. So we are all shareholders in Amazon, investors for the long term. And it's not controversial to say that Amazon, in order to keep paying its investors into the future, to keep consummating the corporate projects it wants to do, in order to keep the extraordinary level of good faith that Amazon has received from Wall Street, essentially, from the investor community over the last several years, where it basically has had a blank check, it needs to develop and protect its relationships with its customers, with communities surrounding its distribution centers and its other operations, and with the workers who in Amazon HQs and in distribution centers and deep into the manufacturing supply chain make Amazon's business model possible. And just, over the past several years, we've been waiting for more action from Amazon to demonstrate that it knows the amazing magnitude of the impact that its business model has on communities, customers, and workers, that it understands that it simply, it can't just simply externalize those costs away from its business onto communities, workers, and customers, that it has to work in good faith to minimize those impacts and to develop credible strategies for reducing risk in the long term. That's increasingly where investors are focused, because we want to make sure that our interest in Amazon and the performance of the company right now isn't just some kind of sugar high, but the company can turn a corner into the long run. So what a lot of companies have done across the board, big, responsible, successful companies have done to credibly manage their major sustainability impacts. That's stuff like worker rights and impacts on customers, antitrust issues, environmental impacts. They've developed, as a lot of my colleagues have said, sustainability reporting initiatives, also credible policies on reducing and cataloging their carbon emissions and their impacts on workers. And they develop management systems to those ends. And what we are looking for in our proposal number 14 by Zevin Asset Management is trying to get Amazon to really improve its approach to sustainability risk by doing a simple thing, and that's putting its money where its mouth is. Over the last several years, Amazon has haltingly, and I think with some hesitancy, rolled out some sustainability initiatives. There's some feedback, or someone's not on mute.
Yep.
There's some noise on the line.
If everybody could put themselves on mute, please.
So, but from the investor perspective, me sitting here on the outside of the company as an investor, an analyst of environmental, social, and human capital risk facing Amazon, it's really difficult for me to distinguish those initiatives announced by the company from greenwashing. It's unclear when Amazon rolls out an initiative what the goals are long-term, what the accountability for those goals are, and how it's going to deliver performance and basically remind itself to succeed on the standards that it's laying out for itself. So peers of Amazon, such as IBM, Microsoft, Intel, beyond the technology sector, you have names such as PepsiCo, have demonstrated commitment, senior ownership of sustainability goals, and accountability by tying a portion of their sustainability goals to senior executive compensation. This is something that's no longer controversial, and as I've said, the company's major tech peers have done so, putting their money where their mouth is by tying their sustainability goals, stuff you will hear Amazon announce all the time, to a meaningful portion of senior executive compensation. Not at first perhaps the senior executive team's whole paycheck, but a portion that's going to put senior management skin in the game, which is something that investors across Wall Street will recognize as the only way to ensure that the C-suite folks are rowing in the same direction as investors will want them to. So it's going to drive performance in the future, not only from a financial perspective, but on the key sustainability issues that Amazon has to get its arms around if its performance is going to be sustainable in the long term. And I'll just end with kind of an image I think that's important for understanding Amazon. Amazon is really, like I say, kind of been running on, if you want to think of it like a rocket ship, it's been running off that first like really strong phase that's going to get it out of the atmosphere. And now we're trying to figure out if Amazon as a going concern has the strategy, the firepower, the next set of rocket boosters to get it to wherever it wants to go. I guess low Earth orbit if you ask Jeff Bezos. And it's about, for a technology company founded in the 90s on a whole new business model and platform, it's at a level of maturity where new things are being asked of it, where its workers, its communities, its investors, its customers are asking it not to simply offload and externalize really important impacts on their communities, but to somehow develop a strategy for managing them. You can think of it, and so if it sounds like we're asking Amazon to do things that sound like corporate responsibility, to sound like being a civic actor with a view toward the long term, I think that's right. And it's something that gets asked of technology companies that get founded on new platforms when they reach this point in their maturity. We're 20 years out from, I guess, a founding. And you had in the early 2000s, the comparator I like to mention is Steve Jobs, who for a long time ran a business that relied on a deep supply chain, Apple, going out into China and manufacturing stuff in a way where the workers were anonymous, unaccountable, and we never really heard about the impacts facing sweatshop workers in Apple factories in China. And after a lot of reporting and a great deal of controversy regarding labor standards in the Apple supply chain for stuff that became Apple products, Steve Jobs, around, I guess, the middle of last decade, had to go to China. It was kind of unheard of. He had to go and walk around the factories that make his stuff for that company. It was about 20 years out from the founding of Apple as a really successful company. And that's when, Apple, they're still in the process of doing it, but they made a turn away from just like, we're only going to satisfy shareholders, we're only going to think about the short term and don't bother us on the rest. toward thinking about their business in a more long-term, sustainable, successful into the long-term type way. So that's what we're asking of Amazon now. It's only right that the company turns that kind of corner. It's something that Steve Jobs did last decade, and we're waiting on Jeff Bezos to do it. So grateful for any questions. I'm Pat from Zevin Asset Management. Thanks for the time today.
Pat, thank you. I want to see if we were able to raise Bruce Herbert of Investor Voice.
Yes, thank you, Susanna. Can you hear me?
Wonderful, Bruce. Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Investor Voice filed proposal number 15 to ask Amazon to end the double standard, the use of unequal vote counting practices that handicap shareholders. As you can read on the slide, the proposal seeks a simple majority standard for shareholder proposals, i.e. a tally of the votes cast for and against an item. The fact is that Amazon uses two vote counting formulas in its proxy. One favors re-election of board members. The other formula undercounts support for shareholder-sponsored proposals in a practice known as formula swapping. The difference lies in how abstain votes are counted. The math is simple. When abstentions are added to the denominator, it automatically reduces the final vote. This stacks the deck against shareholders in a way that is unwarranted and it harms shareholder best interest. This type of double standard is a systemic issue. We have identified more than 100 votes in recent years that were winning majority votes when counted via a simple majority, but were made to fail when management used formula swapping to reduce the tally on shareholder items. In a striking example at one company, a winning 56.2% simple majority vote on disclosure of political spending was transformed into a 34.2% failing vote, 22 points lower, because the company employed formula swapping to count abstentions against the shareholder proposal. That's how it works. Companies choose the formula that suits their ends and can count differently on different categories of vote, as Amazon does on shareholder items versus the board election. To create useful context for this discussion, Amazon's high-tech peers Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft all count shareholder votes using a fair, simple majority standard. The Council of Institutional Investors, CII, in its policy 3.7, declares that abstentions should be counted only for purposes of a quorum. Institutional Shareholder Services, ISS, has written on numerous occasions that, quote, ISS believes that a simple majority of voting shares should be all that is necessary to effect change regarding a company and its governance provisions. A simple majority formula is also mandated by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, for use in determining whether a proposal qualifies for resubmission. Now, in addition, Amazon's policies curtail investor choice. Here's how. With a simple majority standard, investors have four possible choices when it comes to casting their ballot on a shareholder proposal. They can vote for, against, abstain, or leave blank. With a simple majority standard, each of the first three options creates a unique and different outcome, ignoring the board's recommendation, following it, or remaining neutral, respectively. Together, these three form a nuanced, meaningful, and distinct set of tools for sending a message and signaling investor intent. However, when Amazon engages in formula swapping to count abstentions as if against shareholder proposals, an abstain vote can no longer be used to send a message. This diminishes the range of investor choice and further tilts voting in management's favor, all of which can happen without shareholders being aware that votes are being co-opted in this way. In conclusion, it is readily apparent, but not widely known, that Amazon employs a double standard to stack the voting deck against shareholders. This makes it significantly more difficult for shareholder proposals to succeed, as illustrated in the earlier example. There is no reasonable justification for giving management this unwarranted power to sideline shareholder concerns and to handicap shareholder interests. Therefore, we encourage support for proposal number 15. Thank you.
Great, Bruce. Thank you so much. And then the last proposal that will be presented is a proposal on efforts to address hate speech. So we have Laura Campos, Director of Corporate and Political Accountability from the Nathan Cummings Foundation. Laura, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. So as a long-term Amazon shareholder and a funder concerned with racial and economic justice, the Nathan Cummings Foundation believes that Amazon should report on its efforts to address hate speech and the sale of offensive products across its various businesses. Our proposal, which is item number 8 on the proxy, seeks an understanding of Amazon's process to develop policies to address hate speech and offensive products. We want to know more about the experts and stakeholders the company consulted while developing these policies and the enforcement mechanisms it has in place to ensure compliance. Unfortunately, hate crimes are on the rise. Earlier this year, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation called white supremacy a persistent and pervasive threat. And in 2018, the number of hate groups operating across America rose to a record high, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Hate crimes have been linked to hate speech online, and technology platforms have been associated with the rise of hate crimes around the world. Perpetrators of violent racist acts were active online in advance of the Charleston church shooting, the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, the New Zealand mosque shooting, and the bombings in Sri Lanka. Technology companies like Amazon are quickly becoming responsible for policing hate speech on their platforms. The regulatory situation with respect to this issue is changing quite quickly. In the European Union, tech companies are expected to review and remove content flagged as hate speech within 24 hours. Another example would be Australia, which recently enacted laws that criminalize abhorrent violent material on social media platforms, and companies can be fined for failing to expeditiously comply with this directive. In the United States, regulations don't yet exist. However, congressional hearings have focused on the responsibilities of the tech sector to address hate speech. As long-term shareholders, we are concerned that if Amazon does not effectively address hate speech, it could lose its license to operate and face significant fines or restrictions in certain regions of the world, particularly as Amazon's policies appear to be applied inconsistently. While Amazon has policies in place that prohibit the sale of products that promote, incite, or glorify hatred, violence, racial, sexual, or religious intolerance, or promote organizations with such views, a 2018 report by the Action Center on Race and the Economy and the Partnership for Working Families found that Amazon allowed the sale of hate symbols on its site and provided a platform for openly racist writers, musicians, and activists, including some who have advocated for violence. In response to this report, Amazon did remove some problematic products. However, as the Action Center on Race and the Economy report notes, Amazon has tended to be reactive rather than proactive in response to the use of its platforms by peddlers of hate. For a company of this size and sophistication, reacting haphazardly to reports of problematic products linked to hate speech or hate groups is simply not good enough. If the company does not effectively address the continued use of its platform for hate speech, it risks losing diverse communities as consumers, employees, and stakeholders that are supportive. And that can be pretty detrimental to long-term profits. If you look at just one instance, according to Nielsen, African Americans spend about $1.2 trillion annually, and in some cases make up more than 50% of overall spending in key product categories. This key demographic increasingly demands that brands and marketers speak to them in ways that resonate both culturally and experientially. So clearly carrying products that display well-known symbols of hate, even inadvertently, could be very costly for Amazon. Amazon needs to be managing these risks, and shareholders deserve to know more about how they're doing it. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Laura. And that ends the presentations by our shareholder proponents. I don't have any questions from reporters in the question box. I will give it just a second to see if anybody wants to put a question in there. But in the meantime, want to remind everybody that the Amazon shareholder meeting is on Wednesday, this Wednesday, the 22nd at 9 a.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. I'm sorry, 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And if there are any questions, please, you can send them to me directly. I'll make sure that they get to the right people. We want to thank you for joining today's call. And you will expect an email from me, I don't know, in an hour, maybe an hour and a half, with the link to the recording as well as this slide deck. Okay, so please be in touch if there are any further questions, and we hope this was helpful. Oh, I have a question. Okay, from Irina Ivanova from CBSNews.com. Do we know how soon after the meeting the results of the vote will be made public? I am going to open that up to anybody on the call who might know that. I think it varies by company.
Bruce Herbert here. The company has to report within 4 business days to the SEC, and that's under Form 8K. Sometimes, though, the companies do report more promptly. At the annual meeting, they have available what's called a preliminary outcome. Often they don't announce the precise figures. They just say, thumbs up, thumbs down, passed or failed. And so we'll be having our ears open for how Amazon handles it this year.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. I am not seeing any other questions. So again, if you did put a question in here and I'm unable to see it for whatever reason, just go ahead and email it to me. But really glad that you all could join us, and again, hope it's helpful. And yeah, let's all cross our fingers for some great votes on Wednesday. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Susanna.